The Ashmoor estate stood like an immovable fortress on the outskirts of the city, its high stone walls and ivy-covered facades a testament to the family's wealth and power. Inside, the grand halls echoed with the sound of footsteps that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the house, each one marking the passage of time. Time that was slowly, silently, but surely running out. Eva had spent years within these walls, watching, listening, and observing. She was a maid, of course, just another nameless, faceless servant in the vast household of the Ashmoors. Her existence was unnoticed, like the dust in the corners of the house, easily swept away and forgotten. But what the Ashmoors didn't realize was that she had learned more in her quiet observance than they could ever imagine. The Ashmoors were a family built on lies. Lord Lionel Ashmoor, the patriarch, had always been the picture of success. Tall, imposing, and with a sharp mind that could cut through the most delicate of matters, he was respected, feared even, by those around him. His wealth seemed endless, and his influence stretched far beyond the reaches of his estate. But Eva knew the truth. She had seen the cracks beneath the polished exterior, the subtle signs of a man on the verge of losing everything. Lady Isadora, his wife, was no different. Beautiful, poised, and every inch the dignified matron of the house, she was the epitome of high society. She moved through the halls with a grace that made it seem as though she had been born for this life. Yet Eva had seen the cracks in her too. Moments when the mask slipped, when the elegant facade faltered, revealing the fear that lay just beneath the surface. Isadora had her own secrets, secrets that she had carefully buried under layers of charm and poise, never allowing them to surface. Then there was Celeste, their daughter, who had grown into a young woman under Eva's watchful eyes. Celeste was beautiful, yes, with eyes that sparkled with the promise of youth and a smile that could disarm the most guarded of hearts. But Eva had seen the darkness in her as well, the coldness in her interactions, the way she hid her true self behind a carefully curated mask of innocence. Eva had always known that there was more to Celeste than met the eye, more than even Celeste herself realized. The Ashmoors were all masters of deception, but Eva had never been fooled. She knew the hidden truths of their lives, the debts that loomed over them like a shadow, the broken promises they had made to those they had crossed along the way, the lies they had built their empire upon. And yet she had never spoken a word. She had never once let slip the secret she held, choosing instead to remain silent, to watch, to wait. Until now. Tonight something had shifted. There was an unfamiliar energy in the air, a tension that even Eva could feel deep within her bones. She moved silently through the halls, unnoticed as always, her soft footsteps barely a whisper against the marble floors. The guests had arrived, strangers at least to the Ashmoors, 3 people, 2 men and a woman. Their presence was unsettling, their faces unreadable. They were not the sort of people who would typically find themselves in a place like this, and their eyes held a depth of experience that made the Ashmoors uneasy. Lord Lionel greeted them with the customary pleasantries, his voice slightly strained, his smile tight. Eva could see the nervousness in his eyes, the way his hand trembled ever so slightly as he shook the hand of the tall, broad-shouldered man who had stepped forward to introduce himself. His voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of authority that made the air grow heavier with each passing second. Lady Isadora, ever the hostess, joined them in conversation, but her words lacked the usual warmth. She too was on edge, her eyes flickering back and forth between the strangers and her husband, as though searching for some sign, some reassurance that everything would be all right. But the woman, the third guest, was different. She stood apart from the others, her gaze sharp, calculating, and entirely focused. Eva could see it in the way she observed the Ashmoors, not with the polite interest of a guest, but with something far more intense. The woman's eyes were cold, like steel, and Eva knew instinctively that she was no stranger to power. The silence that followed felt like a storm holding its breath. It was the silence of impending revelation. The kind of silence that happens just before everything changes. "Lord Ashmoor," the woman's voice cut through the tension, clear and firm. "You've done well to keep your secrets hidden for so long." Eva's heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and the Ashmoors froze. They had been caught. The truth, long concealed, was finally being unearthed. "We know everything," the woman continued, her voice unwavering, "and we're here to collect." The Ashmoors' faces drained of color. The walls that had stood so strong for so many years were crumbling before their eyes, and they knew there was no escape. Eva watched as their composure shattered, the masks they had so carefully crafted falling away to reveal the fear that had always been lurking beneath the surface. For the first time, Eva felt a stirring within her. The Ashmoors had spent years hiding behind their wealth, their status, their lies. But now it was her turn. She had waited long enough, stayed silent long enough. And as the strangers closed in, Eva knew that the time had come for her to step out of the shadows. She was no longer the maid. She was the reckoning. The air inside the Ashmoor estate felt heavier now, thick with unspoken words and unacknowledged truths. Eva could almost taste the bitterness on her tongue as she stood in the shadows of the grand hall, watching the scene unfold before her. She had been silent for so long, unnoticed and invisible, just another cog in the machine that made the Ashmoors' world go round. But tonight, that silence was about to be shattered. No longer would she remain the ghost in the background, bound by the suffocating silence of her position. Lord Lionel Ashmoor was struggling. The composure that had always defined him, the calm authority he exuded even in the face of adversity, was slipping away like sand through his fingers. His usual confident smile had faltered, replaced by a tight, uneasy grimace. His eyes darted between the three strangers, the woman who had spoken and the two men who stood behind her, like silent sentinels, each of them carrying an air of menace that hung thick in the room. We don't know what you're talking about," Lord Ashmoor stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control. His hand, which had shaken ever so slightly before, now trembled more visibly. The lie hung in the air like smoke, but he was too far gone to see it, too desperate to maintain the illusion of power. The woman's lips curled into a cold smile. She wasn't fooled. "I think you do," she replied, her voice low, measured and full of quiet authority. She took a step forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, a sound that seemed to echo in the silence that followed her words. "You've done your best to bury it all, haven't you? But no amount of wealth can erase the past, no matter how hard you try." Eva's eyes never left the woman. She could see the glint of something almost predatory in her gaze, a quiet certainty in her every move. This was no simple businesswoman or socialite. She was someone who had seen the darker side of the world, someone who understood power in a way that no one in the Ashmoor family ever could. "I don't know who you are or what you want," Lord Ashmoor said, his voice rising in a shaky pitch, his attempt at bluster failing miserably. "But I assure you, whatever you're accusing me of, it's not true." His words were becoming more desperate now, his usual pride replaced with panic. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, Eva thought she could see something akin to amusement flicker in her gaze. She raised one hand, signaling to the two men behind her. They moved quickly, silently, too silently, and before Lord Ashmoor could react, one of them had stepped forward, producing a thick envelope from the inside of his coat. The man handed it to the woman, who opened it with a slow, deliberate motion. Eva felt her heart pound in her chest as the woman unfolded the papers inside. Her mind raced. Was this it? Had the Ashmoors finally run out of luck? Or was this just another game, another power play in a world built on deception? The woman skimmed through the papers, her face unreadable, but Eva saw the tightening of her jaw. The tension in the room grew even more palpable. "You see," the woman said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've left a trail that leads right back to you." She tossed the papers onto the polished marble table, where they slid to a stop in front of Lord Ashmoor. The rustling of the documents was like the sound of an approaching storm, every corner of the room now filled with the weight of anticipation. Lord Ashmoor's face turned pale as he scanned the documents, his eyes widening with each line he read. His fingers trembled, and his breath came in shallow gasps. For the first time, Eva saw genuine fear in his eyes. This wasn't a man trying to maintain control anymore. This was a man who realized the end was near. But what was the end? Eva's pulse quickened as she stepped closer, her mind racing with possibilities. What was in those papers? What was the woman revealing that had such a powerful effect on Lord Ashmoor? She knew she had to know. This was the moment that would shift everything. Lord Ashmoor turned to his wife, his face a mask of panic. "Isadora," he said, his voice trembling, "you have to do something. You have to make them leave." Lady Isadora stood frozen, her usually composed face a mask of disbelief. She had never seen her husband like this. Never. For years, he had been the pillar of their family, the unshakable leader. But now, the weight of whatever secrets they had kept hidden for so long was crashing down on them. She didn't speak. She couldn't. The fear in her eyes said everything. Celeste, their daughter, had been standing by the grand staircase, watching the scene unfold in silence. She hadn't moved, hadn't said a word, but Eva could see the subtle changes in her demeanor. The way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes darted nervously between the strangers and her parents. She was no stranger to tension, but this was different. This was something far more dangerous, and Celeste could feel it. Eva watched her for a long moment. There was something in the way Celeste was watching everything, almost detached but also calculating. Eva had always believed there was more to the young woman than met the eye. The Ashmoors were masters of deception, yes, but so was Celeste. She had learned well, Eva thought, too well. "I'm not leaving until I get what's owed," the woman said, her words cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. "You've made deals with the wrong people, Lionel. You've crossed the wrong paths." Eva's mind whirled with the possibilities. The Ashmoors had always been so careful, so meticulous in their dealings. Yet here they were, cornered by this woman and her two companions. Who were they? How had they come to know all of this? Her thoughts were interrupted as the woman turned toward her, toward the shadows where Eva stood. For a split second, their eyes locked, and Eva felt a chill run down her spine. The woman's gaze was penetrating, as though she could see right through the darkness, right into Eva's soul. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. Eva knew that the woman wasn't just here for the Ashmoors. She was here for something else, something deeper. And Eva had a choice to make. She could remain hidden in the shadows, the silent observer, just another maid who would fade away when the storm passed. Or she could step into the light, reveal herself for the first time, and take control of her destiny. The silence that followed felt like an eternity, and yet it was the moment of Eva's awakening. The mask had been broken. Eva could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like an iron vice. It was as if the entire world had stopped, and she was the only one left in motion. For the first time in her life, she wasn't simply the maid. She wasn't just a silent figure in the background. The air in the grand hall was thick with the tension of secrets long buried, and Eva had a sense that whatever happened next would change everything. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she fought the urge to step forward, to speak up, to demand answers from the woman who stood before Lord Ashmoor. Eva's eyes flicked to the envelope on the table, the papers scattered across the marble surface. What had Lord Ashmoor done? What was the truth that had been hidden for so long, now about to be exposed to the light of day? She could hear her pulse ringing in her ears, drowning out everything else. The woman's gaze had lingered on her for a moment too long, and Eva could still feel the weight of it. Was the woman waiting for her to make a move? Or was she simply enjoying the chaos she had caused? Eva didn't know. All she knew was that her life, her future, depended on the next few seconds. "Who are you?" Lord Ashmoor's voice cracked as he demanded, his fear spilling over into desperation. The woman stood calmly, her posture regal, unshaken. She was the calm in the storm, and she had Lord Ashmoor right where she wanted him. "I told you already," the woman replied, her voice unflinching. "I'm the one who knows everything you've tried to hide, the one you underestimated, the one you thought was too insignificant to ever matter." Lord Ashmoor's eyes widened in disbelief. He had underestimated her. He had assumed his wealth, his status, would be enough to protect him from whatever she had brought. But now, standing in the face of her quiet resolve, he was starting to realize just how wrong he had been. "And yet," she continued, her lips curling into a smile that sent a shiver down Eva's spine, "it was never about me, was it? It was about you. And now it's too late." The room was thick with tension, the silence oppressive. Eva could feel the weight of the truth hanging in the air, a truth that no one seemed ready to face, but one that was inevitable. Lord Ashmoor's grip on the table tightened, his knuckles white with the effort of holding himself together. He wasn't a man who showed weakness, but now in front of this stranger, in front of all the revelations that were coming to light, he was unraveling. Eva had always seen him as untouchable in his wealth, in his power, in his cold, calculated demeanor. But now, in this moment, the veil had been lifted. She was seeing him for what he truly was. Just a man who had made choices, some of them terrible, and now those choices were coming home to roost. It wasn't just Lord Ashmoor who was unraveling. Eva felt it too. The walls that had held her back for so long, the silence, the invisibility, the self-imposed limits, were crumbling. She was no longer just a maid, a servant to be ignored. She was a witness, a silent observer no more. And in that moment, she understood something fundamental about herself. She had power. It wasn't the power that Lord Ashmoor had. It wasn't wealth or status or the ability to make people bow at his feet. No, Eva's power was something different. It was the power to choose, and she could feel that choice before her now, sharp and clear. The woman's eyes never left her as she spoke again, her voice dripping with quiet malice. "You've spent your entire life hiding behind masks, Lionel, hiding behind your wealth, your status. You thought you could buy your way out of anything, but you were wrong." She glanced briefly at the papers on the table, a subtle gesture, but one that told Eva everything. The woman knew it all. She knew the darkest secrets of the Ashmoor family, the things they had worked so hard to bury. And now those secrets were being laid bare. "Do you know what the worst part is?" the woman asked, her voice still calm, but carrying a chilling undertone. "The worst part is that you thought it was all a game, that you could manipulate people, destroy lives, and walk away with your hands clean. But in the end, you're the one who's being played." Eva had never seen this side of Lord Ashmoor before. She had seen his anger, his cruelty, his calculated charm, but now she was seeing the rawness of his fear, the rawness of a man who realized he had lost control, a man who could no longer hide behind his wealth and power. The woman turned to her companions, and for the first time, one of them spoke. "We could end it here, you know," the man said, his voice low and threatening. "Make your life a living hell, expose everything you've done." Lord Ashmoor's face twisted in a grimace of panic. "No, please," he pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do. It was for my family, for everything I built." The woman raised a hand, silencing him. She was in control now, completely in control. "You should have thought of that before you made your deals, Lionel, before you thought you could get away with murder." Eva stepped forward. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. The woman's eyes snapped to her immediately, sharp and calculating. Eva's heart was racing, but she stood her ground. "What do you want from us?" Lord Ashmoor croaked, his voice now desperate. The woman smiled again, her expression cold and cruel. What I want, Lionel, is for you to face the consequences of your actions. For you to finally understand that there are no more games to play. You don't get to hide anymore. Lord Ashmoor swallowed hard, and his gaze flickered to Ava. His eyes held a mixture of fear and disbelief. He had always looked down on her, had always treated her as nothing more than a shadow, a servant in the background. But now in this moment, he was seeing her for the first time. Ava's pulse quickened. This was the moment. This was the choice she had been waiting for. With every ounce of strength she had, she lifted her head high. "I want the truth," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I want to know what you've done, all of it, because I'm done hiding in the shadows." For the first time in years, Ava felt power surge through her. The silence that had bound her for so long was gone, shattered by her own voice. The Ashmoors, for all their wealth and power, were now the ones on the edge. And as the tension in the room thickened, Ava realized that this was only the beginning. The silence that had engulfed the room was deafening, hanging thick in the air as if the very walls were holding their breath. Ava's words lingered, and in the stillness that followed, something monumental. Lord Ashmoor tried to speak, to regain some semblance of control, but his voice faltered. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do." "You did what you thought would keep you safe," Ava cut him off, her voice firm, unyielding. "But you never understood what real power was. It's not in wealth, not in titles, not in the control you tried to impose on others. It's in knowing when to speak and when to act. And today, I choose to act." The woman, who had revealed herself to be the true orchestrator of this grand reveal, smiled with an expression of quiet satisfaction. She had watched Lord Ashmoor crumble, witnessed the breaking of his pride and arrogance, and now she knew that the final stage of her plan was unfolding before her eyes. But this was not just her victory, it was Ava's as well. Ava had not been a mere pawn in their game. She had never been insignificant, though they had made her believe she was. It was Ava who had the final say, Ava who had turned the tide, and Ava who would now expose every dark secret Lord Ashmoor had fought so desperately to keep hidden. The woman turned to Ava, her voice now soft, almost reverent. "You've proven yourself more powerful than anyone could have imagined, but this is only the beginning. You see, Lionel Ashmoor isn't the only one who's been living in the shadows. There are others, people like him, who believe they can manipulate and control. But now the game has changed. You are a force now. You are the reckoning." Ava felt the weight of those words settle over her like a cloak of destiny. For the first time, she realized that her silence had not been a weakness, but a tool, a weapon she had sharpened, though she had never known it. She had watched, listened, learned, and now she was ready to wield her newfound strength. Lord Ashmoor had no more words. His bravado had vanished completely, replaced by a broken man who was now the subject of the very justice he had long avoided. His empire was crumbling, his wealth was nothing but a hollow shell, and his influence, once unshakable, was slipping through his fingers like sand. Ava turned her gaze away from him and looked to the horizon outside the grand windows of Ashmoor Manor. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land, as if the world itself was acknowledging the dawn of something new. "I'll see to it that your wrongdoings are exposed," Ava said, her voice steady and unwavering. "No more secrets, no more shadows. You will pay for the lives you've destroyed." Lord Ashmoor's face twisted in agony, but his fate was sealed. There was no escape from the truth now. He had no power left, only the consequences of his actions to face. As Ava turned away, her mind was already racing forward. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. There were others like Lord Ashmoor who needed to be brought to justice, and she would be the one to do it. For the first time, she felt truly free, free from the chains of silence that had bound her for so long. She had found her voice, and with it, she would bring down the walls of the corrupt and the powerful. She had become something more than a maid. She was the reckoning. She was the one who would restore balance. And as she walked away from Ashmoor Manor, the weight of the world on her shoulders, she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of her true power. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer silent. And from this moment forward, she would be heard.